wish we could stand back and say, what is the right relationship that makes sense for us all right now? And there is one, and it's not exactly what we've got right now.
I'm laughing because the idea that I'm the most cynical person on an episode of Newscast is a very unusual feeling for me. On defence, it's interesting because actually you realise the EU is sort of groping towards a defence function, which they've never really had before. And it's not worked out brilliantly for the UK so far because of that whole, we'll charge you this much to join our loan scheme, and actually French defence companies
the French care more about being French than they care about European defence. Sorry.
But at the same time as you've got that, you've got the coalition of the willing, which is turning out to be quite, well, maybe not effective. It's certainly effective at having meetings and getting pledges out of people and being an alternative way of arranging defence cooperation in Europe. So it'll be intriguing to see if one of Starmer's legacies is creating like a sort of an alternative EU that's for defence and security.
One, having now been rude about the French, one positive thing is that the Europeans have really stepped up on Ukraine. And I think this is something that not enough people have sort of focused on, that, under the Biden administration, the US provided huge amounts of financial support for Ukraine. Under Trump, it has stopped completely, to the extent that the Americans are supplying any weapons, they're paid for by Europeans. Europe is paying for the entirety of Ukraine's ability to defend itself. So Europe can step up when it needs to and when it wants to. So I'm not completely kind of down on Europe. I'm just down on that if we have years and years of petty negotiations about what a relationship looks like, when there are much bigger things that we collectively should be working together on.
And also, don't forget that Brexit paralysed our domestic politics for years and years and years. And we talk about the problems that the economy has now and the stagnation and the lack of economic growth and so on. Obviously, the British economy didn't recover from the crash in 2008, but it certainly wasn't helped by having a period where our politics stopped working. I mean, it was absolutely astonishing. We've kind of forgotten about it because the trauma of COVID has wiped our memory. But before the pandemic, there was a period when the government couldn't really function. Nothing was getting decided. Parliament was at a standstill. Politicians within parties and with other parties were at each other's throats. And that certainly didn't do anything to help economic growth. Then COVID happened. It's taken a series of knocks, and I think a lot of people would fear the thought of going back to that sort of political paralysis, given the challenges that are facing us as an economy and as a country, really.
I'm not sure if the microphones picked it up, but did you hear that noise that sounded like a rocket going off, or like some kind of comedy generator being turned up to 100? I don't know if you picked that. The audience, you heard that, didn't you? I'm not going mad.
I thought it was there to add gravitas to my point.
So
I didn't hear it.
I think that's actually a shepherd tone, which we did an episode of Newscast about many years ago, and I have fond memories of. Right, Felicity, let's zoom in on what's happening in Cardiff Bay then. What have the first couple of weeks of Plaid Cymru in charge been like?
Well, the most striking thing about it has been the sort of messaging that we've been hearing from Plaid Cymru. It's because the new government faces quite a challenging fiscal landscape, given the Treasury's spending plans for the next few years. Now, obviously, they can change, but we can only deal with the plans as they've been currently set out, and they are exceptionally challenging, more challenging than faced the previous government. Plaid has got all sorts of spending commitments, the expansion of free childcare. It wants to pilot a Scottish child payment to address the issue of child poverty, which has been a stubborn and pretty poisonous problem in Wales for decade after decade, really. They're modelling that on the Scottish child payment. Oh, and there's another sound effect coming in right there. I don't even know how you'd describe that one. But
it's like being in a cartoon.
Yeah, it is really. So we're still waiting for some clarity, really, from Plaid on how they're planning to pay for that. I mean, there is talk of reprioritisation. Translated, that does normally mean cuts. And they talk about getting rid of things that didn't work. Sreenap Yorwerth, the new First Minister, during the course of the election campaign, was talking a lot about how Labour had boasted of spending £7 billion to try to get to grips with child poverty, and saying, well, spending the money isn't the issue, it's the outcome that counts. So, it may well be that they're going to identify programmes they feel haven't worked and try to get rid of those, but because they're a minority government, they will have to get budgets passed, and so there could well be some pretty difficult negotiations coming through on that. In terms of the messaging, it's very, very hopeful. So despite all of those challenges, The word hope has been used countless times by all of the new cabinet. They are deliberately positive, deliberately upbeat. And one of the reasons for that, I think, is that they say behind the scenes that they have learned from what they see as the mistake of the incoming Starmer government in 2024, when the Prime Minister, the Chancellor, spent a lot of time telling us how terrible everything was. And Plaid certainly feels that that was a mistake. It's a mistake that they are determined not to repeat. So we've had very, very upbeat messaging. Things haven't really started yet. It's been a couple of weeks where they have to do things like swear everybody in, vote in the Llywydd, who's the presiding officer, the equivalent of the Speaker in the House of Commons. They have to get the business committee set up. They haven't yet allocated who's going to sit on which committees and all that sort of stuff. And now they're breaking for half term. So really...
They've had a busy couple of
I know.
weeks.
So nothing... the train hasn't really left the station yet, if you like. But that is the flavour that they want to give people, that this is something where they can make good changes and where they feel that they will be able to make a difference. We'll have to see whether they're right.
And in terms of having to get the opposition party's support for some things, does that mean some days they might trend a little bit to the right and on other issues they might trend a little bit to the left, to use the very broad political labels?
The maths of this is really interesting. So they got 43 seats and they needed 49 for a majority. The Greens got 2 seats, the Lib Dems got 1 seat. So those two together are not enough to get Plaid over the line for key things like the budget. The Conservatives got 7 seats, Labour got 9 seats. Labour and Plaid have a history of working together. When Labour was in government for 27 years prior to now, a lot of the deals that they did were done with Plaid Cymru to get their budgets through. At one point, they were even in coalition